sometimes we're marketing to our mom, right? Like we're like, hey mom, I want you to see my logos out there. I want you to see this. But if we're managing reputation in the right way, then we're looking at how many brand mentions would we get? If our logo was 300 feet wide on the side of the arena that's down the street from me, is that worth it, right? Do I get $700,000 worth of brand mentions? Maybe, right? But we want to quantify those. Taylor Swift probably isn't going to mention the arena name when she performs. So sorry about that, Jay, if that's what you're hoping for. But
big Taylor Swift fan.
Well, welcome to The Going Rate. I'm Nikki Doherty, brand ambassador at Epicosity, and joining me today is Jay Bachmeyer, growth strategist at Epicosity.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. And we also have a very special guest joining us today. Please join us in welcoming Ben Pankonin, Social Assurance CEO and founder. Hey, Ben.
Hey, thanks, Nikki. It's good to be here.
We are so glad to have you join us today. So to kind of kick things off, Ben, do you want to just talk a little bit about Social Assurance and what you guys do over there?
Yeah, at Social Assurance, we're really primarily focused on helping financial brands to be remarkable. And a lot of that involves understanding how their reputation looks online and helping elevate their story. So I'm excited to talk about that today. I know we talked a little bit in the pre-session just about monitoring and a lot of the different things that are happening. But you all are great storytellers. And so I'm excited to jump into that with you.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot going on there because it's just specifically now there's more brand equity online and more places where people can have the conversations, and it's just so critical in this digital era to have the pulse on the conversations happening about your brand, especially now when word travels so fast, right? Both good and bad.
Yeah, it's so funny because obviously the latest social media startup has been Threads, right? Instagrams, and it's yet another place where we need to have a profile, or we have conversations, and it's another place for us to monitor and keep track of, and there are so many out there now.
Yeah,
it totally is. So Ben, can you just tell me a little bit about? We were talking about all these platforms, all the ways to communicate. How does one manage their brand reputation across all these platforms? In your opinion, what do you think?
Yeah, well, one of the concepts that we always have in data is, what's the universal truth, and what's the source of truth for our data, right? Like, so we have this concept that says, let's say, for instance, you have a website that you have all of your hours listed on your website for all of your branches, right? That hopefully becomes the source of truth. The problem with that is there's probably 100+ sites that look at different sources to say, here's when your branch is open, right? So that's one area that, when we're recommending how you would list your listings and reviews, that becomes a really important thing, because now I'm not just tracking, it's not just the phone book anymore, right? We used to be able to call up the Yellow Pages. We used to be able to call up the phone book and say, hey, this is the place. I want to make sure that you have my phone number accurate and that my address is correct and up to date. If I was good there, then that really handled everything, right? And unless you're over at my mom's house, you just don't see those anymore. So, now like we've got, we're hitting Google, or we're driving in our car and we're saying, I use Apple CarPlay. So I hit the little button in my car. And what's funny is, for a while I was like, hey, I'm not even sure what service that is. So I started tracking it backwards, right? But, if I press that in my car and I say, hey, I'm looking for the local, branch location, and I name the financial brand I'm talking about, all of a sudden that's triggering Apple and it's Apple service, but Apple doesn't look at your website. They actually typically are looking at Bing or some other sites to find some of that data that's listed. And then, of course, there can be reviews on those locations. There can be people making comments, plus photos, things like that. So when I pull up to the branch location, it's really nice if I've got that photo that shows me me what the branch actually looks like. Also is more engaging. So there's a lot of sources of data. We certainly do a service that helps push out to those listing sites so that it can be, kind of that universal source there. But there's also, just a lot of other places online. We start to talk about places like Threads or how does Twitter or Facebook. There's lots of different places to manage your reputation, and it can be certainly overwhelming.
Yeah, it's almost hard to know where to begin, right? Because there's so much. There's the offline reputation. What's that experience at the branch? What's that experience just from general marketing messages? What your friends and family say about you? And then you go online, and like you said, people are looking at the profiles. They're looking at the reviews. Everybody's trying to follow the Amazon review system. And then it really takes a culmination of both of those things intertwined for a consumer to make a decision. Should I bank with you? Should I open up accounts? Do you have the services that I'm looking for? Am I interested? What do my friends and family say? What are people's experience online about you at this branch, which is different from that branch, which is different from another branch, which is different from, how that brand even responds or doesn't respond on like Facebook or Instagram. It's a whole lot to take in and hard to really know where to start.
Yeah, and you made a really valid point, Jay. So when we think about the experience when I walk into a branch, we have a lot longer history of developing that experience than we do the online experience, right? So when I walk into a branch, one of the funny things, I was doing a presentation not that long ago, and I was doing a little bit of research, and I was looking up mortgage rates in one community that we work with, and so. So I'm looking up what are the rates, and as I'm looking up rates, I see that there's a top placed advertisement for a community financial institution in the community that I'm searching. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'll click on that. Oops, sorry for the cost that I charged you for the click, but I clicked through it, and what was funny is the question that I asked was, how do I get the best rate for a mortgage, and then listed the community. And what I landed on was that financial institution's homepage.
Yep.
And so what was really funny is, and their homepage is a smattering of lots of products being thrown at me. And so what was funny is, as I was breaking it down and breaking down that experience, I was like, hey, here's what I was searching for. I asked a very specific question. And then the specific answer that I got was essentially, we are a full-service financial institution with all of the products and services you might expect. And so as I'm doing this as a presentation, I said, imagine if someone walked into your branch and they said, what's the best place? What's the best way to get a mortgage? And what's the best rate I could get? They're kind of lost, right, in a sense. And you said, well, actually, we're a full-service financial institution. We provide all of these broad range of products and services. And you just started listing them all. And you would say, well, that would be a terrible experience. We would never do that to our customers. We would never throw just products at them. We would probably approach them with empathy and kindness, and we would probably talk about the history of other people we've helped and the ways we've helped them. Well, why don't you do that online, right? Yeah. You have a huge opportunity to do that online.
Yeah, it's very easy to have that disconnect, as you said, and I think that's what's important. I think us as financial marketers is to have that ability to think strategically and say, how do we connect these dots and make sure that we're providing the best experience? Because we all know that our contacts, whether it's a community bank or a credit union, oftentimes they're like one people show. They do everything. They do the PR, they do the online management, they're creating the ads themselves, and they're doing the media buys. There's like so much that's the real value that we can both bring to the table is we can help alleviate some of that weight both from a workload, but we can also say, hold up, there's a clear disconnect between what the consumer's trying to achieve and what you're showing them and what you're serving them. And I think that's just that's such a critical part, easy to overlook when you're running in every direction all at once, but super critical to what we have to do and what's our responsibility as marketers for sure.
Yeah. And I think, it goes back to part of our conversation today about understanding what are we monitoring for and where does that lead our customer, member, prospect? Where does that lead them in this journey, right? And one of the things I like to consider as we think about monitoring is there's been a lot of focus on that lately. And one of those reasons is because of what's happened with Silicon Valley Bank. And we've said, hey, because we've got a situation in which obviously there was a high profile investor who the day before everything went down had tweeted something. And it essentially tweeted that, it's time to pull money out. And I think one of the things we have to take and wrap that up and say, okay, what happened in this scenario and where did that happen in the timeline of events? And was that the catalyst for a bank failure? Or was it a lagging indicator of something that was already underway? And I think most of the data science around that would suggest that that's a lagging indicator of something that was already in progress. Now, certainly it did accelerate things in that last day. But when we back up, we have to think about the difference between a leading indicator and a lagging indicator. So when we think about that leading indicator and say, I have a friend who runs a company called Retail Aware, and so he works with brands like a Coca-Cola, right? So when you go reach into a Coke fridge, there's a sensor behind the Coke machines. Pretty creepy, I know, but it senses that a hand went into a Coke fridge. And his technology then says, hey, someone took a Coke out of the Coke machine. Now that's pretty cool from an inventory management perspective, but it doesn't tell you if it does tell them, are you going to run out of Coke and you should restock it, right? So that's important. Hey, people are buying Cokes at the point of sale, but it doesn't tell you, are people going to buy Cokes, a month from now? It doesn't tell you anything about that. It's a lagging indicator of the sentiment of a Coca-Cola, right? So what we want to be measuring certainly are those lagging indicators that say, hey, actual sales tell us people are buying Cokes today. But our leading indicator, which is typically consumer sentiment, which we can measure online, starts to tell us things like, are more people searching for Coke than we're searching for Coke? Are more people looking for different variations, right? Coke actually just switched from Coca-Cola to Coke, and they measure these things very actively. Those become really important. So when we start looking at that, now one of the differences we also have to measure is Coke has a ridiculous number of brand mentions on a daily basis.
Yeah.
If you're a community-focused financial brand, you may simply not have enough data to be able to make accurate leading predictions. Your only predictions may be those lagging ones where you're able to say, hey, Jay, Nikki, you complained on our profile. I'm going to give you a call.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I'm going to message you.
Well, and platforms like that, softwares that you guys use and we've used other variations before, gives people that ability to see what the conversation's being had about them, and more specifically have a point of contact interject during that conversation, right? Like, I'm not gonna be so bold to say that if that specific financial institute had made a comment or pointed out something, that it would have changed the course of the following 48-hour of events, but perhaps it would have maybe slowed down some of the panic, or it's like a way of public relations. It's a way that you can see that conversation happen in real time and try to get ahead of it, right? You're trying to respond in real time, which is what a lot of people are looking for with an online experience, right? As we all want to have that social interaction kind of right now. And financial institutions are pretty behind the curve when it comes to implementing this type of concept, this process, this thought and approach, where all the measurements, like you said, it's all taking place in the past. It's not necessarily how am I reading this, interpreting it today, and then what does it mean within the next few hours? How can I act on it, and what does it mean within the next couple of weeks, right? And I think that's where we all kind of know we need to go. It's just such a challenge to certainly get there. and just one component of the whole picture too, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one of those is to simply take a step back and say, if I got 10 complaints in a day, that's certainly less than I receive, emails in my inbox. So I should probably just treat it kind of like that initially, right?
Yeah.
Like I probably am not getting more than 10 complaints in a day, and I probably get more than 10 emails. So like, why don't I just respond to those? Treat each one of those, with specific responses, guide them to the resources, answer the actual question. Don't just tell them, hey, we're a full service financial institution. Hey, you're asking for the mortgage, right? I'm gonna address that. I'm gonna respond to that, and then I'm gonna guide people there. And then when we look at trends, where we might not have enough information like Coke does to say, hey, this specific, 5-branch, financial brand has enough data, right? But what we can tell you is we have a lot of data on how many people are searching for what do I do with more than $250,000 in my bank account?
Yeah.
What do I do with FDIC? Do I need to work with FDIC insurance? How does FDIC insurance work? What is the NCUA? How do I protect my deposits? Is a money market safe? All of those types of search terms, we do get to gauge intent, and we can do that on a much bigger picture, and then we can start to skate people to that right destination.
Yeah.
So Ben, you have a software program that does allow you to look for the most searched words and terms in the FI space, or how does one I'm thinking of my marketing friends sitting here and listening, like, okay, great. This is great advice. Love it. Where do I find those search terms? How do I go about addressing the concerns of my customers or members?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of publishing of those types of insights lately to help financial brands to know what's happening, right? The golden or silver bullet for us in marketing is to know, what does intent look like? Like, what do consumers want to know before they know it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, on an individual basis, certainly we'd love to know what an individual consumer says every time. We don't necessarily know that. Now, Facebook knows that. Google knows that, right? You can place ads that interpret those. But to summarize that, what oftentimes we're doing is saying, what we can show you is that people are searching for what to do with large amounts of deposits right now. That's fact. If my goal is to both protect the amount of deposits I have and gain more deposits, how do I do that, right? Well, one of those is to walk through a journey, just like we did with the mortgage scenario, and say, if I'm searching with that intent, what sort of resources do I come across? And I can tell you the first resource they're probably going to come across is an article from NerdWallet that tells you what to do with more than $250,000. And the first advice it says is open an account at a different bank. Open an account at a credit union. Take a look at changing your account types, which you may or may not be able to do.
Yep.
Add a different your sort of party. And then, like sort of fifth or sixth, it'll say, maybe you should go back to the financial institution you're already with and ask them if they have additional resources, right?
Right.
So if I know that's the intent and the journey that a lot of people are taking, then what I want to do is alter that journey and say, let's respond to people who are asking us questions. Let's unify what's happening online and what's happening in person so that my front lines are saying the same thing that online's saying. And then how do we begin to unify that and create, a better journey with the content that they need? And that's really the piece that we have to help solve for a lot of financial marketers.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, that sometimes, when we talk about resources availability, the upcoming recession, budget concerns, and looking at cuts, there's like big goals that we as marketers want to make sure that our clients are aligned with, right? Like you're talking about the customer journey, the content consumption along that journey, and making sure that we're putting the right information in front of them. But maybe something we talked a little bit pre-show is, what some of the struggles that they have right now is how to leverage the resources that they're doing today? How do they take advantage of the things that they're doing right now? And we talked a little bit about like that community support, right? Where they're going to events or they're making donations. And a lot of that is sometimes afterthought. It's like a singular post on Facebook showing the handing of a check. And that's fine and dandy, but that's not always telling a story, right? So I think, you know, another way of thinking about community engagement and brand monitoring online is being able to have to bring the engagement component to that, which is how does a credit union or a bank scale up maybe their communication or help tell a better story, and think about that a little bit differently than they went to a golf tournament, right? Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're speaking to some things that are both passions of mine and things that speak to what we're trying to do and help financial brands to leave their mark and be remarkable, and that's really centered in this concept of saying, hey, like what differentiates you from the bank or credit union down the street? What is it that matters? And I know you've both sat in these conversations many times where you've asked probably a similar question, and the response oftentimes is something like, "Hey, it's our people. It's the way we care about our community."
Yeah.
And we got so excited and frustrated by that response. Right. One, I think it's actually true. Right. But the second part of that is, well, how do we tell that story? How do we quantify that? How do we put that into a meaningful story? So we built a product that helps manage a lot of philanthropy, CRA activities, things like that for marketing purposes, because we said, hey, if I can gather the right information up front, and then if I can unify what we're doing in marketing with what we're doing offline, right? So, I like to do, some sales enablement coaching and training with financial brands. And when we do that, whether it's in person or digitally, what we're always doing is saying the way that you build trust as a financial brand and the way you build trust as an individual in your community they're different, but they have to be aligned, right? So
Yep.
So the way I describe it is personal trust and brand trust fundamentally they're similar, but the way you do it is different, right? Like so when we're talking on the front end about hobbies or things that we're doing or maybe we took a trip, things like that, well a brand can't talk like that, right? Like it can't tell that same story of, hey, I just finished an awesome vacation with my wife and it was great and we had a great time and here's where we went, here's what we ate and all of those sorts of things, which is how we build personal connections and personal trust. I can do that with you, right? But my brand of social assurance, certainly I can throw the logo in the background and stuff like that, but it tells a very different story, and it has to be inclusive of all of the people that work here and all of the clients we serve. It has to take on a different appearance. But like you said, the things in the community start to align those things, so we get to say, hey, I'm on a nonprofit board. Social assurance is not, right? Just like my financial brand, it doesn't serve at the nonprofit, but it can serve those nonprofits. It can be involved in that. And so the more we link those and work on that storytelling together, just the more impact you're able to make.
Yeah. And one of the things that we often, suggest to our customers is just making sure that those efforts align with the brand values,
Yeah.
the brand voice. It's oh my gosh, I don't want to give it away, but we had a question earlier this week about like, should we invest and sponsor basically like a stadium, right? Should we put our name on a stadium?
Sweet.
And that is what a lot of people do. And the question that kind of came back to us is like, well, sure, you can invest and there's some value in doing that. But like to a consumer, what does that mean? Like, how does that align with your brand values? Is that really like a mission-driven thing that you feel very strongly about football? Or, could that money be better spent elsewhere or provide better community support elsewhere that more closely aligns with your brand? And then that, I think, in doing that, it allows you and allows our contacts and our FI marketers and the people working at the banks and credit unions to maybe get not only more satisfaction out of investing their time and energy and effort into those community things that matter to their brand, but then it allows them to tell a better story, right? That's a lot of what we do is like, how do we tell a better story? And it's a better story when it aligns with the organizational goals and visions more than it does supporting another stadium, getting more billboards, sponsoring another softball team, which nothing against that, but logos don't create an experience.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like the way you said that. And I think, another way I've heard it said is, sometimes we're marketing to our mom, right? Like we're like, hey, mom, like I want you to see my logos out there. I want you to see this. But if we're managing reputation in the right way, then we're looking at how many brand mentions would we get? If our logo was 300 feet wide on the side of the arena that's down the street from me, is that worth it, right? Is that worth, I think they pay about $700,000 a year for the one that's down the street.
Yeah.
So is that worth it, right? Do I get $700,000 worth of brand mentions in an online space, plus the TV coverage, hey, meet me at this arena, hey, that and naming that? Maybe, right? But we want to quantify those and list those brand mentions. How many would you get normally? Does that make you a more recognizable name? Can you convert that into new account growth? What does that look like? And those become those are fun exercises. Sometimes they're easier than other times, especially if you've got a net new arena in a new location. That becomes really tough.
Yeah.
Because you just sometimes don't know for sure.
Right. And what is the conversation having about that, right? Like you can, some platforms will allow you to do like word clouds where it's like, okay, these terms are all related to each other. And then it's just a matter of how do you connect the dots and how do you interpret that information into either something actionable, or you can look at it and say, this was a very expensive investment and people only care about the music, right? Like, we're on a stadium and all they're doing is talking about the concerts, but we're not really seeing a lot of benefit and value coming back to us. Maybe we need to align our messaging with more of the concerts, with more of the music, or, follow through in that regard. To your point, it's like you said, it's easy to spend a lot of money on big things, but then to have the capabilities of measuring it is the next half of the battle.
Yeah. No, so I think you're absolutely right. Taylor Swift probably isn't going to mention the arena name when she performs. So sorry about that, Jay, if that's what you're hoping for. But yeah, I think we've got to. Yeah. So same. But yeah, as we map that out, right? Like it's tough to figure out, right? Like if those are going to be worth it. But what we do know is there's some big macro trends that we can track. We can skate to those answers. Those are easier a lot of times than is an arena worth it. But you can track brand mentions. And you can look at like arenas, things like that help you match that up.
Yep, and then use that information to come up with unique messaging that could be follow-ups, or maybe obviously. Typically, if you put your name on a stadium, you get some premium ad space in there. So that allows you a little flexibility too to make use of that knowledge for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, perfect. Gentlemen, I've had a wonderful time talking about online reputation, giving some advice, I hope, to our FI marketing friends out there too. Ben, is there any one lasting thought you'd like to send to our FI marketing friends and listeners about online reputation?
I think one of those is be specific. So when you've got a response in, I was reading a review that came in not that long ago through a direct message of one of our FIs that we work with, and it literally started off with, hey, my parents banked at this bank, my grandparents banked at this bank, and I believe my great-grandparents probably banked at this bank. And then they began to share one of the things that they wished would change as far as a policy. I was like, you know, when we get responses like that, they're wanting change and they're wanting us to listen. And I think the more we can listen and actually respond to that kind of post, those are deep, lasting relationships that can go back many generations and hopefully go forward many generations. So respond to those, listen to those, and do it with empathy.
I love that. And I actually think when I was a FI marketer too, my biggest thing is when I got a negative complaint, that they gave me an opportunity, right? They could have just not said anything. They could have moved on. But I feel like any negative complaint is a gift, or any kind of comment is a gift for us to evolve and be better and meet our members' needs where they're at. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. That reminds me of, I'm going to stumble through this, but I think there's a book or an author who says, hug your haters.
Yeah.
And that's that concept.
He has the same first name as you, Jay Bear. He's great. Yeah.
I knew I was going to look like an idiot, but that's a great concept. And you're on the point. And I think, you know, having the right tools in place, the right support people in place to take advantage of those conversations, to identify them, recognize them, and act upon it. That's just critical in today's digital space, both online and offline. And it's been great. Really enjoyed the conversation that we had today, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, appreciate your time. And we'll go, of course, put your contact information here on this last slide. But we look forward to seeing you around the bend soon.
Yeah.
Around the bend.
Nice. Well, we will see you again soon for sure. Thanks a bunch.
Sounds good.